Good morning, Crusty Crew. My name is Sam, my pronouns are they, them, and welcome back to my office. Like 6 o'clock in the morning, there's no natural light, so everything is just my orange lights, so I'm sorry that everything is so orange. But today is the day. Today is the day that we start what Raylene and Ariel from Books Unbound here on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify would call a mashed potato book. Now, am I a month late because mashed potato May was last month? Yes, but we're doing a Pride edition. And you might be sitting here like, what do you mean, Pride edition? Well, I am finally going to tackle the Wayward children's series by Seanan McGuire. Yeah, so here they are. I'm missing one right now. So I own the first and the second, and then the rest of these are from the library. I'm missing the third one from the library. I have a holdout on it right now. But this is a series that I started probably close to 2 years ago now. I read the first book and I loved it. And then, in a mashed potato fashion, I said, I love this so much, I don't want it to end, I want to savor it, I'm not ready for it to be done, and I just stopped reading it entirely. So, here we are to pick it up again and fly through it, because, you know what, it's Pride. The Wayward children's series, I know, has a very vast and diverse set of queer characters, and their fantasy, they're short, they're attention grabbing because they hop from kid to kid, but they stay in the same universe, and you still get glimpses of other kids throughout what they're going through. So I just feel that it's time. You know what? I just read The Priory of the Orange Tree and Day of Fallen Night. I filmed that and uploaded it a couple weeks ago, and after that I had a small freak out and I just binge read Grady Hendrix. Within like 2, maybe 3 weeks tops, I read My Best Friend's Exorcism, How to Sell a Haunted House, Horror Store, and I had previously read The Southern Guide to Slaying Vampires or whatever. And you know what? I need to step away from Grady Hendrix for a little while. I need a break. I need to go back to fantasy. So here we are, diving back into fantasy in a much more approachable style than Priory. So here we are. Now, if you don't know, the Wayward Children's series is all about children who, were brought into realms outside of their own, say like Alice in Wonderland, that kind of concept. And when they come back, they're not the same. They were so used to their world, whether it be good, bad, whatever. So they go to this school to kind of deal with the fact that they are now back in this world. From what I know, first of all, the series is not done. Second of all, I think each book, like, they alternate. One of them is set in like the reality human world, and dealing with things there. I think the next one is set in one of those fantasy worlds, and it just kind of alternates, I believe. And I know that each book follows a different main character. You see glimpses of different characters throughout the story, you interact with them, but each one follows like one main character, and then the next book might follow like one of the side characters that you had seen previously. That's pretty much all of the information that I have, and I read Every Heart a Doorway like 2 years ago, but I don't remember any of it. So I'm going to reread it. So for the next week, I guess we're going to be going through that. Let's get started. Oh my god. Okay, let's start this out with a PSA. Because I found these, finally. These are so hard to find. These are Cherry Slush Alani's. They are my favorite energy drink of all time. They have like 0 sugars. So, That's my thing, because I love me a green monster. There's so much sugar in like a nice classic green monster. So I've been trying to switch over to things that are lower sugar. And I know that things that are like 0 sugars are usually not good for you because they're stuffed with like other things. But a non-binary bitch gotta live. And I need something. So these are my favorite. It's like I just went to Target when I was like 10 years old and got a bucket of popcorn and a big ass cherry slushie every day. And you know what, there's nothing better. We've gotten way off track here. So I am just about halfway through Every Heart a Doorway. I take the dust jackets off when I read hardcovers because I don't like the dust jackets. And I'm still loving it. I feel like going through the series, it's not really a question of whether I love it or not, because like the answer is yes, I'm going to love it. I love Seanan McGuire's writing. I love reading these quick short little stories about these kids. I love being in these different worlds. Like, it's not a question about whether I love them or not. It's just like me enjoying it at this point. I'm going really slow through this right now, and I think that is because like I'm teetering on the point of autistic burnout right now, which is truly the most awful thing to ever walk the earth. So I'm trying to kind of pull myself back, and my mentor and I have been talking about that a lot. So I'm basically just going to sit down for the rest of the day and just read these books. So that's the plan, and I am excited to kind of walk through things with you. I have a whiteboard back there, and I'm going to be keeping track of characters, keeping track of where their stories go, and I'm planning a little like I forget what it's called. I forget what I named my one and only series and on this channel. I think it might be like book bakes or something, whatever. I'm gonna plan out a bunch of those in correspondence to these books over the next couple months because I want to bake and I love these books and they give me great inspiration. So that's where we're going with this. I'm gonna sit down and read, and I'll check in with some more breakdown information later. Okay, hello. So I just finished Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire, and let's kind of have some conversations about some stuff. So this is going to be my whiteboard where I track everything because we've got like 7 books to go through. We've got a lot of stuff going on. So you can't see like anything, but we're just kind of going with it. So this one stars Nancy. So she comes from the world of the dead, which is a logic world. She can slow down her body, so it's basically like doing nothing, and she's just kind of still as a statue, and she's like our main character for that one. And another thing is that she is asexual. Her pronouns, not a romantic. So she's our main character for this one. There are some people that I want to kind of take stock of for where they might show up in other stories. So we have Cade, who is a trans boy. He's from a logic land, and it's a Fae land. He was a really crucial portion of the story, and he is the nephew to Eleanor, who runs the house. We also had Jack and Jill. They were also, I believe, from a logic world. They were from the Moors. And I'm not going to give any spoilers here with what happens with Jack and Jill because they're kind of crucial points in the story. But we don't really have anything about their identities in terms of like their queerness or if they're straight in any capacity. That's not really something that we hold in this space. But they were crucial parts of the story. We also had Sumi, who is dead. I don't really consider that a spoiler. It happens fairly early in the story, and it's kind of like a crucial part of where the story goes. So I don't really consider that one a spoiler. So I guess we're not going to know anything else about her, but she did come from a nonsense world. It's like confectionery land or something like that. It's not Candyland. It's like confectionery land. or something along those lines. I also feel, I don't know if this is going to be important, and if this is a character that I should keep stock of, but I'm going to anyway, just briefly. Christopher, I believe he also came from a logic world, and his was focused on skeleton. So as of right now, this is kind of where we're standing with Every Heart a Doorway, keeping track of our queer characters and also characters that could star as like main characters in these stories coming up, because I know nothing about any of the stories coming up and who they are starring. So Nancy's already had her world. I'm not going to give any spoilers about what happens with her, but she does use she, her pronouns. She is asexual. She is not a romantic. Her world is really interesting. It's the world of the dead. I'm really intrigued about what I'm kind of planning to do with her world for a future video, because I think that her world is really interesting and I'm kind of fascinated by it. So I'm kind of sad that we're not going to know any more about her world going forward, but I did really enjoy starting off the series with her as our main focus. Cade is our trans boy that everyone adores with their entire being. He will not go back to his Fae world, his logic world, and that's pretty stated straightforward just because of the Fae world and their transphobia, which is exactly how I'm going to label it. But he is a direct descendant of Eleanor, and it kind of sets him up to become the main person in the house at some point, like not anytime soon. Eleanor is like a stable figure in the story, but you know, it's just kind of setting up the future going forward. Jack and Jill, they're from logic worlds. They're really cruel logic worlds, focused on like vampire overlord kind of vibe and like a little doctor vibe. They were really, really interesting characters, and I would definitely be interested to receive more information about them, specifically Jack. Jill, I'm kind of interested to learn more of in terms of like her mental state and how messed up she is, but I'm not really interested in following her as a main character. I'm a lot more interested in Jack. Sumi, she came from a confectionery land. I think she was a really good introduction to nonsense worlds, to be completely honest. It's like kind of a stereotypical nonsense, like Candyland kind of vibe world. And she spoke in riddles a lot, and you know, she was nonsense. So I thought she was a really good introduction to that kind of a world and what that can look like in an extreme sense. And then I would super be interested in following Christopher, I think. So he came from a skeleton world, and we didn't really get a lot of information about him other than his comfort with the dead and death due to where he was from. But I'm still definitely very interested in him as a character. That's where we're at so far. We have book 1 down. Let me go grab book 2. So book 2 is Down Among the Sticks and Bones. So this is Jack and Jill's story. So I'm so excited to start that. I'm not going to read the synopsis. I don't want to know anything else. This is Jack and Jill's story, and it does say a prequel. So we'll kind of get to see them, I hope, in the moors and how messed up that is. So let's get started. Hi, hello. So I'm on page like 120 of Down Among the Sticks and Bones. So far, my thoughts on this. I don't really enjoy reading from Jillian's focus, which I didn't think I would. I really enjoy Jack, which I already knew that I would, based off the first Every Heart a Doorway. But I think the thing that sticks out to me the most is the narrator in this. And I don't know if it just feels different because we are actually like within a magical world. But I'm really enjoying the way in which the narrator inserts themselves and kind of like talks to us and makes their presence known. I'm really enjoying it. It feels like a story is being told to you, which I really enjoy when narrators kind of take on that perspective and have this kind of meta thing where like you know that as you're reading a book, like it's pointing out that you're reading a story and you're like, this out-of-body entity, like watching the story from above. I don't know, I really enjoy that perspective. And I'm really enjoying the way that it is done in this book. That's all I really have to say about it. I think that the world building is really nice, but that's kind of my update, and we can have a bigger conversation once I am finished with it. Good morning, Krusty Crew. So let's go over Down Among the Sticks and Bones, which I just finished this morning. Right now it's like 6 a.m. and the lighting is terrible, so I'm going to do a little voiceover for my whiteboard scene because I just couldn't manage to get the lighting correct. So for Down Among the Sticks and Bones, we followed Jack and Jill. They went to a world called the Moors, which is kind of like this logic world. I believe it's a logic world. It's kind of broken into 4-ish parts. We've got like the vampire, the doctor, and then it briefly talks about the werewolves and the deep sea. And this entire world is basically like a monster place. So it runs mainly on foundlings, which are kids who walk through the doors into their world because like the human population cannot actually sustain itself based on all of the monsters and all of the destruction going on. And our main like adult figures, like the people who run this world, we have a vampire called the Master, and then we have Dr. I think Bleak. So Jack and Jill kind of find their way into this world after leaving a very oppressive space with their parents who put really weird gender roles onto them, and it was really gross, and they treated their children like dolls. So these two girls walked through this door and they found their way to the moor, where they were found by the Master, and he has this deal with Dr. Bleak that every foundling that comes through, like it's like a trade-off. So one foundling the Master gets, one foundling the Dr. Black gets, and back and forth and back and forth. But ultimately Jack decides to go with Dr. Bleak, so she ran down and chose him and went to be his assistant. He is a mad scientist. Madness kind of descends from there. So they were in the world for I think 4 years, maybe 5. I think it was like 12 and a half to like 17. And before things went awry and they had to go back to their real world. And that's kind of all you need to know about that. So for Jill, we don't know anything about her gender identity really, other than she uses she, her pronouns, and her sexuality, her queerness, or any of that. We don't know anything about her. And she goes through some like pretty traumatic things with the Master. We don't lay witness to any of that, but you know, it's implied. Jack is confirmed to be sapphic in nature. There is no like label to it. But she does fall in love with a girl named Alexis. It does not end well, which what can end well in the Moors? Nothing. Literally nothing. We've got our queer rep in this, and it was really good queer rep. I really enjoyed it. I really loved this book. I gave it 5 stars, but my favorite thing about it was the narrator. It was just a beautiful narration style, and it perfectly like pulled you into the story. Like you're being pulled into the story, but not to like live within it, more of standing above it, watching from above. And I thought that was done really artfully by the narrator. That's not something that's like easy to do. So I thought it was pretty fantastic. Down Among the Sticks and Bones, 5 stars. I liked this more than Every Heart a Doorway, and I figured I would because Jack as a character could potentially turn into like one of my favorite, all-time favorite characters. I was just a little bit obsessed with her. That's where we are. So for the 3rd book, it's Beneath the Sugar Sky, and it is the one that I don't have a physical copy of. It's like 3 or 4 weeks out at the library, so I grabbed the audiobook from my library app. So I'm gonna listen to the audiobook of that one, and I think that's the only one that I'm gonna be doing an audiobook for. So I gotta go to work now. Talk to you later. Okay, good morning. So another morning check-in. So you got another of my voice talking over our whiteboard session. So I finished yesterday Beneath the Sugar Sky, which was all about Rini, who was Sumi's daughter from Confection. She falls out of the sky and lands in the turtle pond at Eleanor's school for wayward children, where she is starting to disappear based on Sumi's death from book 1. Basically, I find my two main characters in this to be Rini and Cora, and honestly, I kind of thought Cora was a weird main character vibe to have in this. Cora was a new character introduced to us from like a mermaid realm. Our main introduction to her was like, I'm fat, and all my life that's pretty much all I've gotten from the world until I became a mermaid. No one acknowledged my strength or my abilities. It was all just me being fat. And then it kind of took a weird twist because we ended up in Confection, which is Sumi's land and Rini's land, trying to fix that whole scenario because the queen that Sumi was supposed to defeat was never defeated because Sumi was murdered first, and the whole timeline thing was like weird and mixed up and nonsense, which was the point because Confection is a nonsense land. But it all ended in this scene of like Cora talking to this queen, and this queen is like making assumptions like this must be the land that you've always wanted to be in because, you know, you're fat. And I'm just like, okay, this feels odd and not in a great way. I don't know how I felt about this one, so I gave it a 4-star, and I thought it was fine, but I definitely had some conflicting thoughts and opinions on how Cora's fatness was like taken into account, and this is coming from someone who is also fat and has been fat pretty much my entire life. It was just weird at certain points, and that's not to say that I didn't enjoy Cora as a character. I think Cora as a character deserves more time to become more developed, and I'm kind of hoping we get a moment with her because I think she deserves better than just what we saw in this book, because we saw some glimpses of her like in a really great like state moment, like doing her thing, but I feel like her levels of like self-doubt and anxiety really kind of took a shine over every other part of her for the most part, and I just feel that she deserves more. Like, I'm sure if we were to have another story with her, we would get a more in-depth picture of her, but pretty much I'm saying this as like, I feel like she's been our most underdeveloped main character so far in the series, and of course that was only book 3, so again, it's not that I didn't like her, and it's not that I didn't like her character introduction, or like it's not like I didn't understand where her character struggles come from. I feel like I need more time with her. It wasn't very long, and I just needed some more time with her, and I didn't have that, so I'm hoping that I get it eventually because I think she has a lot of potential to be a really interesting character, and I really enjoyed her interactions with Christopher, which we got more of Christopher in this. We got more of Christopher and Cade in this. We also got more of Nadia, who is a drowned girl, and she gets kind of moved out of the scene fairly quickly, but I'm really assuming that I'm going to get more of her. They put her in a scenario that I really enjoyed, that I don't really want to spoil, so I'm not going to, but the position that she was put in, I thought was a really strong, interesting, and dynamic position to go into. Of course, I got more of Christopher and more of Cade, and very quickly Christopher is becoming like one of my top characters. I don't know, there's something about him that just like has my heart. We got a lot of more character progression with Christopher. He has this bone flute that he's always had that he plays to like wake the dead, like not wake the dead, wake the skeletons. So if you have like a dead body, the skeleton is going to like climb out of the flesh and be just skeleton, which we see in this with Sumi. So it's very interesting. It was very interesting lore. I want even more of Christopher. Like, I don't think I can continue this series without a Christopher story of him going back to his world, because I have to see it. I need to know more. On top of that, I also kind of feel like this book was kind of like a building block. Like, I don't think this was meant to be like a favorite in the series for the most part. I think it was a building block story of first learning more about 4 characters. And I also think there were a lot of building blocks for how the world system worked. They went through and they explained this concept of to and from worlds, and that the regular human world is like a from world, and places like confection and the moors are a to world. So it also puts into perspective, like, you've got this from world and you've got all these 2 worlds that are kind of connected to it, but they could also be connected to other from worlds, and like it's this giant interwebbing system. So that was really well explained in this. I liked it. I still gave it a 4-star. I still had a lot of aspects that I enjoyed about it, even though I had some that I did not enjoy. Ready to start in An Absent Dream. I guess let's get started. Good morning. So let's talk about In an Absent Dream. So this is book 4 in the Wayward Children series, and this one is actually about Lundy. So we are first introduced to Lundy in Every Heart a Doorway, the first book in this series. She is one of the teachers, and is basically the second hand at Eleanor's School for Wayward Children. And some bad things happened to Lundy. So I didn't think we were going to get a story about her, but I'm actually really happy that we did. So I'm kind of struggling with the thought of whether Lundy was queer in any aspect in this book, because initially I'm thinking, no, there's no romance in this, there's no nothing. But thinking about it now, I'm thinking that there were actually some queer undertones between Lundy and her main side character, Moon. You know, it's kind of that thing that you're thinking of where it's like, no, they were just besties and they lived together forever, like those old Victorian Sapphic women, and they died together in that house. And everyone's like, no, they were just besties. And I'm like, okay, so there are some queer undertones here that I feel like I can extract, but nothing fully clearly cemented, especially because Lundy was a child and romance was not a part of her plotline in any capacity. So Lundy, at the age of 8, went to the Goblin Market, which I believe is like a Fey world. It's explained as this world that was created when a young child was left there by their parent. Their parent was like a salesperson. I forget the word that you use for it, but they were lonely. And then a couple other people started to come, and the world was like, you know what, let me open up all the doors and really populate this area as a place where we take care of each other, kind of, and honor fair value. So everything in this world is based upon fair value. Everyone is taken care of, and no one is screwed over by anyone else and all of that stuff. So if you don't adhere to fair value, say if you were to, okay, so a pie maker has 2 people in front of them and each one wants to buy a pie, and they're like, okay, it's 1 ribbon. Well, the first person only has 1 ribbon to their name, and the second person has 100 ribbons to their name. Expecting the same price from each person is not considered fair value because one person has so much more than the other. That pretty much applies to everything that's not a biological physical need. So you can go forage in the world for berries. You can sustain yourself off the land very easily, but it's those things that I wouldn't consider a luxury, but they're not your most basic necessities. So when you don't adhere to fair value, you start to transform into a bird, which is a very interesting concept, and it's kind of my worst nightmare, but that's pretty much what this whole world revolves around. So Lundy gets there at the age of 8. She's constantly going back and forth throughout her life, and she meets her best friend Moon, and her and Moon go on adventures and they do crazy things, and Moon definitely, I think, has depression, and she ultimately gets herself in a lot of trouble in terms of fair value that Lundy kind of takes some of the personal blame for not being there for her, and does her best to help her in every capacity that she can. And you can't really have Lundy's story without Moon. I loved their relationship. I loved their story. I loved their dynamic. And I loved their dynamic with the Archivist, who is another, like, really crucial character, but I don't really want to, like, give too much information on the Archivist because, I don't want to spoil anything in terms of that, but I think that my favorite part of this was the way that the story was told. So, Lundy gets into all of these crazy adventures while she's at the Goblin Market. Like, she slays the Wasp Queen. She gets, like, attacked by some other things, I don't know, that try to, like, take out her spine. Like, it's noted that she's got a big scar down her spine. There is no action in this story. We do not see any of that. That is specifically, like, she's running out of the world because this happened. And I loved that. I loved the way the story focused on relationships, fair value, and, like, personal responsibility, and also, like, a community responsibility. I loved it. Loved it. I thought that it was such an interesting way to tell the story, and this very easily could have turned into, like, a massive, like, adventure, like, fighting story, but it wasn't. It was about community and fair value and valuing other people. So when it comes to, like, choosing genres for things or, like, categorizing things in terms of genre, I have a really hard time with it, but In an Absent Dream kind of feels like a cozy fantasy in a way. I don't know if you can, like, really count it as a cozy fantasy because I wouldn't say there's, like, a happy ending at the end. I'm not really sure what the, like, genre requirements of a cozy fantasy are, but it gives off those vibes. This was such a great choice in characters, and Seanan McGuire did fantastic things with her. I'm on to Come Tumbling Down. I'm already, like, 75 pages into it, so I'm literally almost halfway through it already. And this is another Jack and Jill story. So I'm living my best damn life. Truly. I'm gonna go keep reading. I'll talk to everyone later. Hello. So it is a beautiful, rainy Saturday afternoon, and I have been doing nothing but reading. So let's talk about book 5 in the Wayward Children series, Come Tumbling Down. So, shocker to us all, this is another Jack and Jill story. So you are introduced to Jack and Jill in the first book. The second book, Down Among the Sticks and Bones, is, like, their story in their actual world. And now this book, number 5, is, like, an adventure story for everyone to head over to Jack and Jill's world, the Moors. So we have a lot of key players in this one, I'm going to say. We have Jack and Alexis, who I kind of count as, like, a unit, because they are just the cutest little baby queers, and I love them. And then we have Christopher, Cade, Cora, Sumi. Those are the 4 people that go on the adventure to the Moors. And then we also have Jill. So what really happens in this one is that Jack and Alexis come tumbling into the basement of the school through a door, and Jack is, like, flipping her lid. She is having a moment. You want to know why? Because Jill pulled, like, an Invasion, like, Body Snatchers moment and was like, I'm just gonna, you know, take your body, and that's gonna be my body. So my father, the vampire master of the Moors, can turn me into a vampire. There's a whole story about why Jill can't be turned into a vampire. I don't want to spoil anything. So Jack and Alexis are like, oh my god, we need hardcore help because Jack has OCD. She was never, like, officially diagnosed with it, but that's because she's been living in the Moors. How do you get diagnosed with something that the world that you live in doesn't know exists? You don't. You self-diagnose at that point. And it's all very obvious. So Jack is flipping her lid, and she's like, this body that I'm in, which is Jill's body, physically, is dirty, and I could never get it clean. How do you clean your blood? How do you clean your organs? Even if I were to, like, take off all of the skin, I still wouldn't feel clean. And I'm just like, oh, Jack. And Jill's just running off being a psychopath, as always, because Jill is not right in the head. And, you know, there's a lot of things that can be said about Jill and her mental state and her trauma and all of that, but we're just gonna live under the phrase of Jill ain't right. That's kind of where we're at with this one. I do kind of imagine this to be cut up into two different sections to an extent, because you've got the main group that goes off, which is Jack, Alexis, Christopher, and Sumi, and Cora, who is a mermaid, is actually called by the drowned gods of the Moors. So she goes sprinting to the ocean, like crazy sprinting, and Kate is just like, oh my god, shit, and runs after her. So they're kind of like a very, very brief, like, secondary part of the story that I feel was very, very interesting, and I liked it a lot. I liked the way that this story kind of expanded our knowledge of the Moors, and how their system functioned as a whole, because it really focused on, like, balance and fairness in the Moors, and how when you cause a problem and a piece of the Moors becomes unbalanced, you know, other creatures of the night kind of swoop in to restructure the balance, and there's nothing you can really do about that. So I thought that was incredibly interesting. And I love seeing Jack and Alexis. Don't get me wrong, I loved seeing them again. I didn't really think that this was the most necessary story. I felt like I had gotten the majority of what I wanted from Jack and Jill already, and if I were to receive another Jack and Jill story, this is not the one that I would have wanted. I still gave it a 4 stars. I still enjoyed my reading experience of it. I feel like I just would have preferred something else, I guess. But nothing wrong with that. It's just not where I would have gone with the story, but I still enjoyed it. And I still thought it was worth reading. Now, I'm already the majority of the way through Across the Green Grass Fields, which is book 6, which is known as the Horse Girl book. So I have some thoughts on it, and we will discuss it when I'm done. Hello, it is Sunday, June 18th, and we have a lot to go over. So I finished the last 3 in the past 24 hours. We've got Across the Green Grass Fields, Where the Drowned Girls Go, and Lost in the Moment and Found. Why don't we sit down, get our coffee? This is my Pride Professor from Watcher, my all-time favorite mug, and let's go over everything. Let's start with book 6. Across the Green Grass Fields is about Reagan. She is intersex, and she does not find out until I believe she's like 7 or 8 years old, when her parents tell her, because she is not progressing in puberty the way that her peers are, and she's like in the popular girl group in elementary school, and everyone's like, you don't have boobs, you don't have a period, and I'm like, you're like 9 years old. She ends up telling not a friend, that she is intersex and trying to like confide in her after finding out this very like difficult thing for her, and all of a sudden feeling like her normal life that she had curated for herself was no longer normal, and her friend freaks out and says horrible things to her, so she goes crying, sobbing into the woods and finds a door. Door takes her to Hoofland, where she meets Pansy and her herd, which includes the like main side character Chicory. And the whole thing about Hoofland is that Hoofland thinks that every time a human comes into their world, they're there because the world itself is in danger, and this human is here to save them all, to save their world. So what you're supposed to do when you find a human is take them immediately to the queen. That is not what this herd of centaurs does. They give Reagan the chance to make her own decisions, and she decides that she wants to stay and be a part of their herd, working with unicorns and just kind of living her best life, living her happy life with her bestie Chicory. And oh, how things are normal, but they quickly go awry. So she's literally got like 5 years of normalcy in this horse land. And ultimately things go awry as they so often do. But I really want to talk about how I did not think that I was going to like this story, because everyone talked about it like, oh god, it's just another horse girl. And I have to say, I think this is a lot more than just another horse girl story. I really, really enjoyed this. It's not like my favorite of the series, but I thought that it was really quality, and I thought that the like lesson learned at the end was way too applicable to the real world. But the thing that you learn in the end is that humans aren't the saviors. You should not rely on humans to come and be your savior, because they're not. They are the problem. So I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed Reagan's relationships with other creatures, and I really enjoyed the stark difference between Reagan's relationship with her like human friends in the normal like Earth world and her friends in Hoofland. I thought it was a really beautiful, like, interesting split on how social constructs really affect young girls, even in elementary school, in comparison to how, without those social constructs, without those social pressures, how a person can thrive. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really interesting. Her intersex identity was a really crucial, like, point in this story. You know, the thing that I love in a lot of the Wayward Children series is that the queerness is a lot of the time like subtle. It's not like something that really like plays a huge impact in the story. It's something that's thrown in there, it's something that's referenced, but it's not like the big problem, except for Cade, but we don't have Cade's story yet, really. We just know of Cade's situation. But this one definitely like centered around her intersex identity, because the problem kind of centered around her intersex identity and how the human world interacted with that. So, wanted to put that out there, because I don't know if it was good, I don't know if it was bad in that term, but I enjoyed the story itself. And I thought it was a really good story, and I really enjoyed the overall message at the end, and I enjoyed Reagan as a character. I thought that she was really interesting and dynamic, and I liked following her. Now it's time to come back to the human world, where we go to Where the Drowned Girls Go. So this is actually like a Cora story for the most part. I would say that she's like the main focus character. So we all previously know that Cora went in Come Tumbling Down to the moors, and she had a whole scenario with the drowned gods, and they were doing some real messed up shit to Cora even after she left the moors. So she is like covered in like this oil slick kind of rainbow thing that won't leave her, and the drowned gods are just like calling to her. She can't sleep, she can't eat, she can't be in the water, she can't exist as herself. And she goes spiraling into this deep despair of, I will never be able to go to my real world, the trenches, if the drowned gods are calling me, because what if they are able to get to me in the trenches and then they ruin my world? I can't do that. Cora decides that she wants to go to the Whitethorn Institute, which is like the sister school to Eleanor's School for Wayward Children. And it is the school that you go to when you want to forget about the world that you went to. So that's kind of where we start off. Like a lot of the other stories that are set in like a quest kind of area in the human world, there are a lot of characters to follow. We had the girl with no name, we had Emily, Stephanie, Reagan, Rowena, and Sumi. So Cora was like our main central character, but all of those people were also like significant characters in the story. And we learned a lot about the Whitethorn Institute and how much harm it's choosing to do to its students. It's a really, really terrible place. I feel like it's making a direct comparison to a real world way of treatment of like mental illness that I can't make that direct comparison, because I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember either what the institute is called or like what the method is called. Like, it's there in the back of my brain, and like my brain is trying to make the connection between the Whitethorn Institute and something in like our real exact world, but it's just getting lost somewhere. So I just kind of want to put that out there, that I feel like there is a direct comparison being made. I cannot remember what it actually is at this exact moment. But the main thing is that they do like opposite treatment. Reagan, for instance, from Across the Green Grass Fields, she is in this story, in this institute, and she gets fed like a blend of like disgusting meat. And this is because she is a hardcore proponent of like ethical farming practices and all of that, because she was ultimately like, she spent 5 years with the centaurs who practiced ethical farming and butchering and such and such. So, you know, forcing her to eat this blend of disgusting meat that came from a significant amount of harm and disgusting place, instead of a sustainable, ethical source, obviously really messed with her brain. Those are the kind of practices that the school condones and really enforces. They're brutal. But the thing is, Cora voluntarily brings herself there. All of a sudden, Sumi shows up and she's like, Cora, what the hell? And Cora's like, Sumi, what the hell are you doing here? And Sumi's just like, well, I had to come and get you because everyone knows that I'm going back to convection. Like, that's just gonna happen. So I was the only one who could come and get you and know that, like, I could get out and we would be fine. And Cora's like, no, I want to be here. I want to forget the drowned gods. And Sumi's like, oh, you poor sweet thing, absolutely not. It kind of culminates in all of these girls kind of functioning together to decide to get out of the school, because they realize some very messed up things are going on inside. You either forget your world and decide that that part of you is gone and you're going to be normal, or you stay there forever and have your entire identity stripped from you and you don't even realize it. They all figure out a way to escape, and I really wouldn't say that there was a clear ending to this. Obviously there's a clear ending because they escaped, they did their thing, some stuff happened. But I feel like this really leaves a room for a continuation with the Whitethorn Institute. And I say that because of some things that happened with the headmaster. They have left a large opening for that story to continue. Honestly, I would not say that I loved this one that much. I thought it was okay. I think I gave it like a 4-star. I thought it was fine, but I feel like it felt kind of like a filler book. It felt kind of like, okay, I'm going to introduce you to this story, this concept, this, like, institute, but we're very clearly waiting on another book to come in and to, like, continue on with that story. Like, this story does not really feel complete or, like, satisfying. It makes it kind of hard. I enjoyed the story itself. I enjoyed the relationships. I enjoyed, like, the insert queerness. I enjoyed, like, the topics around bullying and abuse. I thought it was a good story in terms of the character relationships and development of this world, but I really felt like it was lacking in its ending. And let's talk about the 8th and final book, Lost in the Moment and Found. So this is a story about Ansi. So Ansi was Cora's roommate at Eleanor's institute, like Eleanor's school for wayward children. So we had like a super brief introduction to her in Where the Drowned Girls Go before Cora transfers schools. Her story was the hardest for me to read. I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it like a 4.5. So Ansi, also known as Antoinette, in the human world, her father, in a Target, just in the toy aisle of a Target. How traumatizing. I'm getting off topic, but afterwards her mom kept trying to get her to go back into a Target. Like, excuse me, ma'am. I would not make my 5-year-old try to go back into a Target after she watched her father die. Personally, that would be a boundary that I would set. No more Targets. No more we would go to Walmart. Personally stating. Okay, back on topic. Her mother remarries this man named Tyler, and Ansi is like, I don't like him. From the very start, he gives off bad vibes. She cannot figure out why she doesn't like him. I definitely knew from the very start why she didn't like him, but I am also a survivor of the biggest trigger warning in this book for pedophilia, sexual abuse. So, rough one. I would not say the Wayward Children series as a whole is, like, always easy to digest. There's a lot of death. There is unaliving yourself attempt. There are some hard topics, but I feel like this one was the hardest, and that might just be because it was a little bit too close to home for me. But Seanan McGuire does provide a trigger warning at the very beginning of this story, which I thought was amazing and super, super helpful. I know that publishers don't always let you do that, so I'm really glad that that was included. So that scenario happens, and Ansi decides to run away in the middle of the night because she's so afraid. And she finds the store, and she walks into this shop, and she thinks it's just a normal thrift store until she gets there, and she's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This ain't it. There's a talking bird. There is a magpie with glasses on his face. And that's kind of where her story starts. In this store, she meets the magpie, and then she meets Vanetta, who is an old woman who is also at the shop, and they have to explain to her, like, this is where all of the lost things go, and then there are doors that you can open and step through, and we, like, go and we buy things from these magical worlds. So Ansi is honestly just living her best life for, like, 2 years doing this, going in and out of worlds, buying things, organizing the store, just kind of existing in this shop until a ghost of the founder of this world shows up and is like, they didn't tell you what you needed to know. Here's my journal. It will tell you everything. And she reads this journal, and she finds out, like, the reality of this world and what this world takes from her for being there, and the ways in which the magpie and Vanetta ultimately took advantage of her, and really did a significant amount of harm and disregarded her consent on the entire scenario. So, like, she could have decided to do the exact same things that she had been doing for the past 2 years, but she was unable to make informed consent because they kept information from her. So that's really what this story kind of boils down to. Like, we're following this young girl. She's only like 8 years old. She runs away from home for a horrible, horrible reason, shows up in this world that feels like it's perfect. It feels like it's kind of like everything. It gives off Halloween Town vibe of, like, you go into that shop and there are all those, like, lost socks and all of that. Like, that's the vibe that you're getting. And then you realize that these two trusted people that she had trusted for the 2 years that she had been there had been deceiving her and lying to her and withholding information from her for the entire time. And actively deceiving her. Actively, like, pushing her concerns to the side. So that's kind of what this one focuses on. It's like the harm in which adults can really do to children. I wasn't really super interested in the world itself. I was really interested in Ansi as a character. I thought she was really a great character to follow, and she has the potential to be on, like, some of my top favorite characters for the entire series. I'm really hoping I get a lot more from her. She has the potential to show up quite a bit going forward, and I really liked the ending with her own personal agency really focused on. I think after everything, she really deserves some personal agency. And I enjoyed her as a character so significantly. So yeah, that's where we're at. So this is where we end off. I have all of the books right here except for the third one. I kind of want to talk about like my order of favorites. I think I really love the series, but I definitely have least favorite to a favorite. So at the bottom is going to be Beneath the Sugar Sky. I liked it, but I feel like if I were to go back and reread the series, I would skip that one. And then we have Where the Drowned Girls Go. I'm putting that one second to last because of the fact that it feels so unfinished at the end. And then I'm going to do Come Tumbling Down, third from the bottom. I just didn't love it that much. Like, it's not the story that I wanted in terms of Jack and Jill. And then I would do Across the Green Grass Fields and Lost in the Moment Is Found. Then I would do In an Absent Dream, which was Lundy's story. And then I would do Every Heart a Doorway. And then my number one, hands down, my favorite, Down Among the Sticks and Bones. In terms of this series as a whole, I think it's a really interesting series and format to do it in. I think that it really kind of gives off cozy fantasy vibes. I'm really happy with this entire video concept. There is one thing that I want to talk about before we end, and I'm going to go over to my story graph because within the week that I have been doing this, one of the stories went from having like no cover to actually having a cover. That's the 9th book. Has been titled Mislaid and Parts Half Known. It is set to be released in 2024. And the description is dinosaurs and portals and a girl who can find both in the latest book in the Hugo and Nebula award-winning series. Nancy is the latest student to pass through the doors at Eleanor West School for Wayward Children. When her fellow students realize that Nancy's talent for finding absolutely anything may extend to doors, she's forced to flee in the company of a small group of friends looking for a way back to the shop where the lost things go, to be sure that Vanetta and Hudson are keeping their promise. Along the way, temptations are dangled, decisions are reinforced, and a departure to a world populated by dinosaurs brings untold dangers and one or two other surprises. A story that reminds us that finding what you want doesn't always mean finding what you need. Book 9 will be set with Nancy on a quest in the real world. So that comes out next year. I have to wait a whole year, but that's fine because that gives me a whole year to start buying the rest of the series second hand. Happy Pride for a very subtly but clearly defined queer fantasy series. Here we are. The Wayward Children series. It's really fantastic. I recommend it. I recommend it if you find yourself in a fantasy slump, but you really want to pick it back up. Because each book is between like 100 and 200 pages. Totally worth it. Totally worth your time. I read 8 of them within a week. So, I hope that everyone is having a fantastic and happy Pride. If you are looking for more Pride recommendations, they will be coming up next. We are going to be looking at horror next. So stay tuned for beginner's queer horror. I'll see everyone next time.